Well, welcome back to Wall Street Silver. We have a very special guest today, a man who needs no introduction, the one, the only, the man, the legend, Mario Manico64. Thank you for joining us today, Mario. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Jim, for inviting me. I really enjoy your channel and your campaign, which I think is going to be ongoing for a long time. Hopefully, it will pick up even more. I see that your channel has got 15,000 subscribers almost. I see that there's silverbacks 82,200 on Reddit, which is great. And yeah, we were talking before we started the interview how my views have picked up a lot ever since the beginning of February, which has coincided with the Wall Street Silver movement. I've been telling my viewers for over 5 years that the only way to defeat the bullion banks is to take physical, not just silver, but gold also out of the market. And it's great to see that people are gaining awareness of that strategy.
You don't focus purely on precious metals like we do. You're more of a broader economics channel, but always with that Austrian sound money type of philosophy. It permeates just everything you say. And I watch about, I think, half of your videos. You broadcast every day and you're in a different time zone, so I miss some of your things when I have a busy day, but I think I probably catch your videos about half the time. And especially when you start talking about silver or gold, or I always tune in specifically for those videos. But hey, let's get right into some of the questions we have for you. Lee, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. You had such an excellent video on your channel today. You're talking about the cyber pandemic and the World Economic Forum, and boy, they have such a great track record of predicting the future. I suspect it's a pretty high likelihood that we are facing some sort of cyber pandemic or whatever they want to call it, probably similar to the gas pipeline, but probably on a much bigger scale. In that kind of scenario, where do you see silver and gold fitting in a portfolio? What type of silver would you be buying?
Yes, it's very hard to say exactly what would happen under a cyber attack, what would happen to the financial system if things would shut down for months. I mean, after World War I was kicked off in the summer of 1914, the same people, of course, they're not exactly the same people, but the same group of globalists, they closed the New York Stock Exchange, I think, for the whole summer. So it's difficult to say, but one thing that I'm comfortable with is having gold and silver outside the system, physical. And I've been buying all kinds of silver over the years. I started buying in 03. I bought my first gold coins in 02 and silver a little later. And the other day, I just did an inventory of my stack. I do it like every year or so because I keep buying different coins and bars whenever I can. And I just wanted to find out what I had exactly and count the weight. And I realized that I have so many different kinds of silver. And I don't think it really matters what you buy, as long as there's silver in it. I even found that I have some like $1 bicentennial dollars, and they're clad,
Nice.
but they've only got like a third of an ounce of silver instead of the usual 3/4. So any kind of silver really, I think, is good. Of course, in some countries like the UK, or even in the US, it's good to have a majority of your silver in coin of the realm. And coin of the realm in the UK are silver Britannias. In the US is silver Eagles. So yeah, the majority of my silver are Britannias, but I have a lot of other stuff as well.
I bought these this weekend, Silvertown bars.
Yeah.
And I got some maples too. So
yeah.
I try and collect a variety as well.
Yeah, and I also like numismatic coins, which are a little different. But I even think that numismatic silver coins will do well because even if the premium doesn't go up that much, the collectors or the rarity premium, the silver itself will do well. And I love history. And by buying different coins from different countries, you learn a lot as well.
So a few weeks back, we interviewed Quarter Hoarder, and he does metal detecting, and he's found a whole variety of early coins from back in, the colonial days. And one of those coins that he has found is the bigger pennies. They were substantially bigger. So you look at the size of that coin, and you realize how they've debased the currency over the 200 years. So have you found that in collecting as well?
Yeah, and if you look back even further back in the UK, pennies were made of silver, not of copper. So
Wow.
there is an even, gradual debasement there. I like watching some of the metal detecting channels as well. It's really interesting. Where I am, I'm quite near the old Roman road, they call it. It's the road that came from Dover to London, even when the Romans were here. Maybe I should get a metal detector and try to
Oh, wow. Yeah,
look
you
for.
could really,
Yeah,
that could be
yeah,
wild to see Quarter Hoarder going nuts. And but I remember that episode we did. He said in England you can't do the same thing because of ownership of finding those things through metal detecting. Didn't he mention that
He said something like the sovereign state owns everything.
the sovereign state owns all that stuff underground? It's not the local
yeah.
landowners.
That's right. I guess if you find something, you're supposed to uh, tell the authorities, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure that's really obeyed on a
Yeah,
regular
yeah.
basis. Well, I'm going to turn the conversation more to economics because that's what Mario is an expert at. You've been as a vocal analyst, that we're probably going to be facing a currency reset in the future. The several months I've been watching you, that's a consistent theme, and I agree. I'm just wondering, what sort of time frame are you seeing that? Are we near? Or you see it as further out in terms of a currency reset? And what sort of signs would you be watching for that the government's preparing for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, a reset really means a correction, and I think in terms of asset classes, we have seen stock market and other assets reset versus gold ever since 2000, 1999, 2000. Even though a lot of people look at the stock market now and they say, oh, we are at all-time highs, but I think the top of the stock market in real money was back in 2000 because the Dow to gold ratio was at around 44. Now we're around 18 or thereabouts. But in terms of a currency reset, uh, I think that's part of the reset, that the gold going up over the years, but there will be a point where it will accelerate and they'll reach a level where they're happy with. I think we're still far away from that. We have seen signs from officials like Mark Carney, I think, at the Jackson Hole symposium back in 2019. He said that the dollar was going to lose its status. And then you had Putin a few months later, end of 2019, saying he expected the dollar to lose a lot of value or collapse very soon. And all the talk here, like my video today, I spoke about the cyber hack that the World Economic Forum and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace warned us about. And usually when these people warn about things, it's that they're planning it. I think they're the bad actors, you see, but they are very smooth. They've been doing this for centuries. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, they were probably behind the trigger for World War I. I spoke about that briefly today in my video. So yeah, it could be very soon. I think it could be within the next 3 years. It could be next month. Who knows? But and that's why I always tell my viewers that you should try to get out of the system as much as possible. I think Jim Sinclair of JS Mindset, he came out with a term called GOTS, GOTS, get out of the system. Doesn't mean you get out completely, of course. You need to have a bank account to pay your bills. You might want to have some holdings of miners, gold and silver miners, or whatever other a stock investment you want, or even bond investment. But personally, I'd like to be out of it as much as possible.
Yeah, can we talk about the timing of this just a little bit more? The World Economic Forum has been participating and running this thing called Cyber Polygon, where they're basically preparing for a cyber attack, and there are many companies that are involved in this thing. That is in July. So, you know, my thinking is they had the event 201 back in October of 2019, and then, you know, we had the Cerveza thing starting in February. So that's about like a 4-month window. That brings us into the fall, which is typically a time where you'll see a stock market really sell off. So my take on that is potential for like September, October timeframe. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, it could be, and it could be also that they're already in the process of planning it right now,
Yeah.
and that the Polygon could actually be the real thing. We never know. They like to confuse people, I think, because Klaus Schwab even said last year that a cyber attack or a hack would make the pandemic look like a picnic. So I think they're definitely planning it, and people like Fauci, for example, there's a video from 2017. I think he was speaking at Johns Hopkins or Georgetown somewhere, and he said that he was certain that there would be a massive pandemic during the first term of Donald Trump. So these people, they warn us. It's just if you're willing to listen.
Yeah. Hey, if you listen to Bill Gates, he's been talking. It's like they had this already mapped out, and they were talking about this in advance years beforehand. So you sort of wonder. And in terms of cyber hacking, we just had this major pipeline, the Colonial Pipeline, hacked in, what was it, 2 weeks ago? And I wonder, and that seems to have died down all of a sudden. I would have thought that a major cyber hack of our key energy infrastructure would have made more news and been longer lasting. Don't you think, Lee? It sort of disappeared from.
I think they were stress testing the system. What do you think?
Stress testing.
Yeah,
it was a trial run.
Yeah.
Trial balloon, and also it's to put it into people's mind that it's when it happens, and you know, people will be used to it. It's to get people used to the idea. I think we also had a payment system problem at the Federal Reserve earlier this year.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and like if you look back at 9/11, even in 1993, for example, they had that someone tried to blow up something in the basement of the Twin Towers, and that failed. So, you know, that stays in people's heads. And I think that's probably what this pipeline cyber security thing was all about. And they linked it also to payment of a ransom in cryptocurrencies. It's all seems to be related.
Can we shift gears to FedCoin and
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and cyber, I mean, crypto, and just get your take on. I have this theory. I'm probably the only one that maybe crypto was just put out there to take people away from silver and gold and drain people's money and get them used to the kind of the idea of cyber and FedCoin. And
yeah, so cryptos were supposed to be the anti-bankster system, but now we're seeing Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, everyone getting involved. And you kind of wonder whether it was like a controlled opposition, cryptocurrencies. And you kind of wonder also all the infrastructure that they've built on the blockchain with all the different coins, Ethereum and others. You know, the bankers could come and take over this very easily with all the money they have. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. The Fed coin, I would say, unless it's backed by something like gold and silver, it will be just as bad as what we have today. I don't trust the CBDCs, but I'm sure they're going to link it to cryptocurrencies, and a lot of people in the crypto space are going to get in with it. And I think the other thing about cryptos that is really significant, and China's heavily involved in this, is the Internet of Things. And Internet of Things is basically going to link everything you do to the internet, and it's going to be on the blockchain. And I think that's the way they want to take us. And this cyber hack, bringing the financial system down, is a way to implement this system. And that's why I want to have some, gold and silver outside the system. I don't think, unfortunately, we'll be able to avoid this system, but if you can have a foot outside as well, I think it's good.
We just interviewed Rafi Farber, and I know you have also recently. And that guy is very impressive. And we were talking about some of these same subjects in terms of, will people adopt Fed coin or digital token, since it's not really a crypto, since we got to be careful of our language. A crypto is decentralized, and something from the Fed or the European Central Bank would, of course, be a centralized digital token. But Rafi's theory is people are going to reject this because of the lack of privacy in handling your daily transactions. People are going to run away from it. And my question then becomes, all right, run away from it to what? Because what are your other options, really? Actually carrying gold and silver is too cumbersome and difficult to transport. And so then my question becomes, does some sort of crypto survive and become the alternative to the Fed coin or the Euro coin or the UK digital token? What do you think becomes the way that people flee that system in order to have privacy in their own transactions?
Yeah, it's really a difficult question, actually. Yeah, we could have another crypto like a Monero or the privacy coin or private chain. But you could also look at it differently in terms of community. You could have people basically tune off from the main world and live in isolated communities, like in the countryside, small communities, and there they could barter with gold and silver. Who knows? Or you could have cryptocurrencies where you have a gold and silver backing, but that's of course not ideal, right? The most ideal thing is to exchange pieces of gold and silver, because they're not just money, gold and silver, they're also currency. They used to circulate as currency 100 years ago or more, and paper initially was like a technology. It made the currency easier to circulate, but it had to have backing. So maybe if we can, I think the free market will find a way, hopefully, and maybe it will be a mix of blockchain and cryptocurrencies backed by gold and silver, or some people using gold and silver privately. I mean, I've had viewers, for example, who contacted me to do things outside the purview of my channel. And one of them paid me in silver. They just shipped it to me by post. I said,
Wow.
I accept silver as payment. So you can do it right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
have you heard of Kinesis or Load, some of these digital tokens that are backed by fully allocated gold and silver? And
I have heard of Kinesis. I've gone through a lot of how it works, Kinesis. The only problem I have with that is that it seems really complicated. I just want a system where I can exchange gold and silver. I don't want to leverage. I don't want anyone to pay me a fee or anything. I just want plain exchange.
Gotcha.
And but I think it's a good system, Kinesis. I think it's honest. The auditing there seems to be legit. I think Robert Keynes looked at it, and so yeah. But there's also other platforms like Glint. They don't have silver, but you can store your gold with them, and they also provide a peer-to-peer function where you can send people gold as quickly as you send them a text, so a lot quicker than blockchain,
Hmm.
because Bitcoin, I remember, used to be really quick, but now it's so slow and it costs so much.
Mhm.
So I always say leave it to the free market.
Yep.
Can we talk about the role of the banks going forward? Because it sounds like FedCoin is going to be direct to the individual, bypassing the whole commercial bank system. They surely cannot be for being replaced like that.
Well, I think Jay Powell, who's actually trained as a lawyer, he talked about this a few months ago, and he said that for the Federal Reserve to issue currency like that directly to the public, it's not legal. It would have to be, there would have to be legislation for it. So I think they'll probably definitely find a good crisis to make that possible. And eventually, yeah, I think they want to eliminate the banks. I don't think it would be overnight, but it would be gradually, because then they'd have total control over everyone. And I think the BIS would be at the top there, IMF, and then you have all the central banks. I mean, here in the UK, we don't have too many banks left. We've got 4 or 5 big banks. It's not like in Germany, for example, there's loads of banks. In the US, there's loads of banks. So yeah, the Fed coin would be, I think it's not going to happen overnight, but they're, baby steps right now, the Fed coin.
But that raises an interesting question, because the banking cartel in the United States is so powerful and it finances so many politicians. I have a difficult time imagining that our Congress, which is bought and paid for by financial interests, would ever legislate the banking system out of the middleman position. They're sort of the gatekeeper. They collect their tolls. They are the rent seekers in the economy. They are the ones who are capturing their 1% to 3% of every transaction somewhere in there. I have difficulty imagining a replacement system where they don't insert themselves into this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess, if you look at the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C. is a government agency, but the 12 regional banks are private. So, and they're owned by the major banks like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Citibank. Yeah, but so the bankers already own the Fed. So even if, it could be the New York Fed basically taking over everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because the New York Fed, they always have the most power. They always have the Fed president always has a vote. The other presidents, if you notice, they go through a rotation. But yeah, it's difficult to really pinpoint what's going to happen. They could have a Fed coin and still have the banks, but the Fed coin would be something to be used during crises. So that they can inject liquidity quicker instead of going through the banks. Because if the banks are in trouble in a crisis, they're not going to lend as much. So it could be like a buffer system, the Fed coin.
I think you're right that this reset, let's call it, I don't think it's going to be legislated. I think it's going to take a crisis to trigger it. Some sort of market collapse or some other triggering event where all of a sudden all opposition is just pushed aside. Like when Lehman Brothers was collapsing back in 2008, I believe it was. The crisis got so bad economically that just essentially they were able to just push aside all congressional opposition. And they just, everyone was in such a panic financially that they just was like, do something, pass something, and it just slipped right through. Whatever they put into the bill, no one read it. And that's how it'll happen. It's like, it's going to take that type of event where everyone's just afraid, everyone's in a panic, and this legislation's probably already prepared, and they're ready just to tuck it in and pass it on an emergency basis. and then we'll find out afterwards what was in it.
I guess it
Yeah.
could be the cyber attack. And I remember in '08, they were, I think Hank Paulson and others were like saying, if you don't do this, we're going to have martial law, the world is going to end. And you scared all these politicians into voting for TARP again.
They seem to get whatever they want.
Yeah, or they'll create the crisis if they need to. Look what they did. Remember back a year ago with COVID, it was like forbidden to even suggest that possibly it was released on, even suggesting that the virus was released on accident from that lab. I remember Zero Hedge got banned from Twitter for even suggesting that for months. And now it seems like, oh, now that Fauci and a few others, they're acknowledging that could have been what actually happened.
Now you can talk about it.
Now you can talk about it. It's fine, but these people are willing to create a crisis to achieve their ultimate goals, and I wouldn't put it past them to, what do they call it? A false flag?
False flag, yeah.
False flag operation type of, where we would, I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy person, but God, it just gets annoying when all the conspiracies start coming true, isn't it?
Yeah, and what they did in last year's crisis, that we don't even have to use the word anymore because it's so ubiquitous. They control the narrative, and I think with the financial crisis, the next one, they're gonna also push their narrative, and they might even censor people like us who know what's really happening, and the fact that the system is being brought down because it wasn't sustainable anymore, not because it was attacked by Russians or aliens from outer space or Chinese or anything like that. But you can bet that the World Economic Forum, the central banks, the big banks, big corporations, they're all going to get together just like they've done in the last 12 to 14 months. And they're going to try to control the narrative about the reset of the system.
Mara, can we get into what's going on in the markets now? I mean, we have silver, it's up today. It's at 27, almost 27.90. What's your longer term outlook on silver?
There's the silver chart right now.
Yeah. I just saw that before we came on that gold and silver popped. I think gold went up to almost 1,800. I have a line that's coming from the top last year, and it's a little more like this. Yeah, so I think if we break like 28, 29, we're off to the races. Of course, 30 is still really important, I think. And once we break 30, we could be at 50 very quickly, I think.
Is that how you draw it, Mario? Sort of more like that?
Yeah, that's how I drew it.
Yeah, I sort of ignore that little wick right there. And
yeah, even the, or maybe even the ignore the whole thing there, because that was the day of February 1st, wasn't it? That was that. But I would take it down a little more to the one here afterwards. Yeah. And that's where I think we are right now. We're trying to break out. You can see how they're trying to keep it below that trend line there. But
is that more your
yeah,
chart?
that's the way I'm looking at it more.
Gotcha. So we're sort of at that breakout point. We get above it and we're coming back and retesting.
Yeah, that's called a pennant there.
Yeah, and
that pennant actually is part of a consolidation pattern that started last March when silver dropped below $12 or $11. So if you measure 11 to 30, that's $19. So if we break like 30 or here, you add 19, that takes you to like 49, 48. So
you think, yeah, I mean, there's really no resistance because you really have to go back almost 8 years to see where the resistance starts. And something back in 2012 I don't even know how much that would even count as resistance anymore, because when you go back that far in time, I'm just not sure how relevant that is.
And I think it's,
and it looks
sorry.
like gold's more the leader right now. You know, for the longest time, gold was in the downtrend and silver was going more sideways. But gold is definitely broken. You know, I have these two lines drawn because they're sort of two different downtrend lines that you can see were forming here. Ignoring this one, and you saw the breakout here, coming back and testing, and then launching upwards. And I don't know if this is still building here. Maybe it comes back and.
I mean, a few weeks ago, we broke through 1800, and I thought it would go up quite quickly after that, and it has. Because if you look back at, I think it was 2011 to 2013, we had a triple top at 1800. I think now 1900 is going to be quite important, because I think that's pretty much where we closed 2020, 1900.
This triple top right here.
Yeah. So that was around 1800. So I think gold is looking very good, and it feels like we're climbing like a wall of worry in gold. People are still not very certain. They're not very enthusiastic, and it just keeps climbing. And with silver, I would say as well, you know, the consolidation, that pennant that we've had is such a long-term pennant. It's almost like a coiled spring. It's like a basketball that they've kept underwater, and it's, when it pops, it's going to go. And
I could see a very quick run up to 35, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you know what I think is likely to happen is we're going to overshoot. We may have a run up to 40 really quickly once we get through 30, 31, but then it's going to come back and build a new plateau, probably in that 35 to 37 range. Or we're going to overshoot, then it's going to come back. That's just what typically happens with these things. And I'm hoping it just finds a higher plateau and we can start retaking their position as the financial metals that they have historically that people use to protect themselves. And people need to understand that's not crypto. Crypto is not that long-term store of value. It's gold and silver still, and history will reassert itself. And I hope that the younger generation learns that lesson. Soon.
I think crypto is still an experiment, and it will take a lot of time to prove itself. I mean, gold and silver they've been around thousands of years as stores of value. Very little is said about saving money. It's people talk more about borrowing and credit, but that's why we're contrarian, and we are like against the system. So yeah, if you're gonna save, I think you should try to save with physical silver and physical gold if you can afford it. And it's like a bank run, really. That's what it is, basically.
Well, Mario, you've often said in the past that if there is a currency reset, we are going to probably go back to some sort of gold-backed new system. But then what governments always do, they'll start with, after a currency crisis or a fiat crisis, they'll start with sound money again. I question whether we're even, with the current generation of economists, they are so conditioned not to use gold in their currency, whether we just need a whole new generation of economists to come onto the scene before we can get back to a sound money policy. I don't know if you've thought about that.
Yes, I have. And I think there are a lot of young people out there who think like us, the Austrian perspective. You know, look at Rafi. He's a younger generation. I think they've just been quiet. You know, they've been kept quiet. The mainstream media, the mainstream academia, they only focus on Keynesian policies. But if we have a major crisis and they lose control of everything, people are going to start asking questions, just like they started asking questions after 08. A lot of people who got involved in cryptos or gold and silver, they were trying to find questions to why we had what we had in '08. So yes, it sounds like really far out to think that we could go back to a sound money system, but it could result, it could be a result of a necessity because things get so bad. And then, they have to admit, it will totally discredit the Keynesians, much like the Soviet Union. I remember growing up, I was really shocked in the early 90s when everything imploded with not a shot fired. The Berlin Wall fell, the Iron Curtain fell, and 2-3 years before, you never thought that the Soviet Union would collapse, and it did. So that's
Yeah.
how I feel about that.
Can we expand this out a little bit on just mass psychology in general? I'm a big believer that humanity operates kind of like a flock of birds, and that first bird turns and then everyone follows that way. We've had this whole trend with cryptocurrencies. Now I'm starting to see the whole tide turning with precious metals. I've been following this market for a long time. You were always kind of like, it was like obscure. No one really talked about it. You talk to your friends about it, they look at you like you're crazy. But I think that tide is turning. And what's your perspective given the success of your YouTube channel? And you've been building it a long time. So
yeah, and I started looking at precious metals in '02, and back then I still worked in the city of London. I try to inform friends, colleagues, and family about it. Some of them listened to me. Yeah, and it felt really lonely. I knew about the manipulation way back then as well. Yeah, and it is encouraging that my channel has picked up. I started out in end of 2015 talking about the same topics. And
We regularly have 20,000 people, 20,000 views on most of 15,000 is very common. And sometimes you hit 25, 30,000 views on your videos. So
yeah,
there's definitely an audience, and the fact that your channel has exploded so much this year, it just tells me that more and more people are tuning in to people like yourself, Mario. Chris Marcus, his channel has really grown dramatically this year. All of these sound money channels seem to be going through a dramatic growth spurt, and I'm hopeful that we're sort of an alternative media, just waking people up, working together. This is sort of a synergy thing. We're all communicating, we're all telling the same story, just with different voices and different guests, and it's an education process. And I've learned a lot from watching your channel. And I just really thank you, Mario, for all that you're doing.
You're welcome. And I think during the American Revolution, when it kicked off, very few people wanted a revolution. I think there was only about 5% of the people that rose up. But so to change things, you don't need 100% of the people to want to change. So even though I still think, when you go into the wider world out there and talk to people on the streets or at my golf club or anywhere, very few people have a clue about what's happening. But like you said, more and more people are waking up, and that's a good thing.
Mario, you've been at this a long time. You know your history. Back during the late 70s, when we had this last major inflation, stagflation type of environment, we had Paul Volcker as the Federal Reserve Chairman. We had a lot less debt in the system back then. The United States only had 30% debt to GDP. So back then, it was feasible to dramatically raise interest rates in order to stop inflation from getting out of control. He briefly raised them up as 18%, 20%, something like that. But now today, the environment's totally different. We have 150% debt to GDP, 30 trillion in debt in a 20 trillion economy, roughly. And I wonder, is it even feasible to taper? Forget about raising interest rates. Is it even feasible for them to stop printing at this point?
I don't think it's possible because aside from the humongous amount of public debt, corporate debt, personal debt, you also have all the derivatives out there. Some people would argue that the notional amount of derivatives or leverage is 1,000 trillion or a quadrillion, and they're probably right. So they try to normalize policy in 2017 to 2018. And look what happened. They triggered the repo crisis in 2019 and they had to reverse everything. I think they will keep coming out and talk about tapering because that's what they do, trying to manage the market. But they could try it. But I think last time, I think Powell raised rates to around 2.25%, and the whole system almost imploded. Now, if they raise it to 1, I think they'll have big problems. So, unfortunately, they've gone too far down the road of inflation, and by inflation, I mean the creation of funny money out of thin air and credit that there's only 2 solutions. Either they just keep inflating, and then people lose confidence in the currency, and that's called the crack up boom or hyperinflation, or they pull the plug and implode everything. There's no middle road, I don't think.
Oh, I agree. I mean, they painted themselves into a corner. I think they've actually done it intentionally, and as we discussed earlier in this video, they're probably going to pull something to change things.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Mario, this has been wonderful to have you with us. You're always a pleasure to talk to. You're a pleasure to watch on your own channel. I'll put the link to your channel in the description of this video, although I'm pretty sure 100% of our audience already knows who you are and your own channel. You've got almost, what, 50,000? How many do you have on your channel now? 50,000?
Just getting up to 49,000.
Yeah, so we'll round
Hey,
it up.
Before we go, I just want to encourage everyone to watch Mario's video from this morning. It's excellent, covers a lot of stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Mario. Let's do it again in a month or two. And we'll touch base with you and get your update or get your viewpoint on where we stand then. I'm sure we're going to have an interesting year as 2021 continues to develop.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me on your channel. And hopefully when we talk again, silver will be at $50.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.